Welcome to the Configure Price Quote podcast. My name is Frank Sohn and I'm the founder of Novus CPQ Consulting. This podcast is 100% focused on Configure Price Quote, also known as CPQ, and will provide you useful insights into this topic. My guest today is Protik Mukhopadhyay. Protik is a managing partner and co-founder of Standav Solutions, a system implementer focused on Salesforce and Aptus solutions. Protik was previously with Pros and Apttus and is based in the San Francisco Bay Area. We're happy to have him. Welcome, Protik, to the podcast.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks for having me join you.
Protik, the first question I have to ask you, how did you start working on Configure Price Quote? What was the trigger for you to get started in that area?
I was one of the early employees at Apttus back in 2013 when Apttus was less than 100 people. That's how I got involved in my first CPQ activity. My background is I came to the US as an immigrant, got my master's from USC, and then started working in various organizations like NetApp, Brocade, mostly doing project management. And then in 2013, I joined Apttus as part of their professional services team. And that's the first time I got introduced to CPQ. And it has been a very interesting journey since then.
Oh, I bet it is. And you have been in firms that had and have a different focus. Pros more on the price optimization side, and Aptus has a large suite of products like quote to cash and CLM. So what was the most important learning for you?
So what I saw at Aptus was they were evolving from being a contract management solutions company to being a CPQ company, and eventually now they are having a full quote to cash footprint. And the same thing with Pros. When I joined them in 2014, they were completing the acquisition of Chameleon CPQ. So I see companies that are trying to build a whole footprint, and whether it is CPQ and price optimization at Pros or contract management CPQ, I think the common theme I saw across these companies is everyone is trying to add more value to their customers and bring that end-to-end process flow perspective. So I would say both of them came from different spectrums, but the common theme in Pros and Aptus was both CPQ, one coming from the contract management side and completing the vision, other coming from the pricing optimization side and completing the vision.
I want to take a step back here, Protik, for a minute, because as an immigrant myself, right, so I'm always interested. When you came over, was that initially what you were planning to do, to focus on configure price quote, quote to cash, something in this area? Or is that something that developed while you were here? Because you mentioned you were first doing project management, so I guess it was probably not on your mind initially.
So I have a really interesting journey, Frank. So I came here as a student. So when I came in, my main focus was to get some kind of a job, because when you come here on a visa, you need to find a work based on your master's. So I was completely focused on getting something, and I was really lucky to land up in Brocade. Brocade was a $2 billion company, and within a few years, they acquired a company called Foundry, and they were doing a lot of this integration. So I was part of the IT transformation team, working a lot with the CRM team. Eventually, by the time I left Brocade, I was one of the key stakeholders responsible for the CRM solution. And definitely, I never planned to get into CPQ when I started out or when I came here. But working on the other side, being a client myself. So typically, the people I work with today or sell into are the people I was 10 years ago. It gives me a really unique perspective, and it has been a pretty interesting journey since then. But definitely I didn't plan to get into CPQ when I came here as an immigrant. I was more focused on getting my master's and getting any job I could.
Oh, and which brings up a very good question, because that's something that I don't see a lot of in Asia Pacific in this area. You almost see no CPQ providers over there. I will have one on the podcast here pretty soon, but it's rare. It's not that common. What do you think is the reason for that?
Traditionally, CPQ or now the quote to cash footprint is more of an efficiency play. Most of the customers I've seen in the US are on the second or third journey, where they might have started the CPQ journey with SAP and Oracle, and now they are looking at a SaaS provider. If you look at Asia and other regions, I think they are not mature. I don't think they even started on their first CPQ journey. So that's a great opportunity because probably at that point of time, the initial cost was really high. But with SaaS and the whole recurring revenue model, people can consume CPQ. And I am seeing some trends in the Asia Pac where people are looking at contract management. And I think I predict with a few more years, we'll see more CPQ companies emerge. Either the current mature partners from Europe and North America will go there, or we'll see some local companies emerge. And the second thing I would say is if you look at manufacturing, that has traditionally been focused in Europe and North America. But I think now with China and India now having manufacturing hubs, once we have consumers and once we have people who are actually buying in these countries, we'll also see an emergence of CPQ product companies emerge from these regions, which will be catering to specific needs of buyers in those regions.
And I think that's absolutely correct what you're saying, because there are a lot of CPQ specialists in this area, right? So they work for different CPQ solution providers. And so it seems to make sense to have more local CPQ offerings as well. Anyway, so it was just since I had the opportunity, I had to ask the question. Now, Protik, I would like to understand what got you to found Standav Solutions and become a system implementer.
I have been part of Apttus and Pros prior to joining and starting Standav. And what really promoted my journey into Standav was looking at how customers were not getting value from their investments of CPQ solutions, and how a partner can essentially come and complete that missing link. So working with customers, providing them the best practices and working on their solutions, which are very unique to every customer, is not that easy for product companies to do. So I saw a gap. I saw the big four consulting companies really focused on large enterprises. So we founded Standav with the whole premise of focusing on customer success and looking at the mid-market companies that are not getting that level of strategic vision from the big four consulting companies.
Why did you decide to team up with the firms that you're teaming up with right now? I mentioned in introduction Salesforce and Aptus. What was the reason to have a partnership with them?
This is a suggestion I would give to any entrepreneur, right? When you're starting out, you should definitely look at what you're familiar with. I had worked and I had the relationship, and I definitely have that understanding of the Apttus ecosystem, and I felt that I would like to partner with them. They also have a very good, complete code-to-cash vision that aligns with our culture, so we felt they are a great partner. But we are not really limited to one product. We also look at Salesforce, so we do a lot of Salesforce Lightning, a lot of Einstein work. We are also involved in a couple of emerging companies like PriceFX that does pricing optimization. So the way I see ourselves are we are a SaaS SI that is focused on adding value to customers, and partners can bring a lot of value to these product companies. So we figured out strategically to partner with the chosen ones, but we are open to future partnerships as we expand the practice and keep adding more value to our customers.
How many people does Standav have, and where are the offices located, so that it's understandable for a listener also to see when it's interesting to partner with you, what kind of projects are right for your team?
Totally, Frank. So Standup is headquartered in Santa Clara, Bay Area. I am also based out of Bay Area. I reside in Fremont. We also have offices in Texas and DC, and we have a delivery center out of Bangalore. Our total Salesforce Aptus practice is close to 100 people, which is a combination of managed services implementation activities. As a company, Standup also does some other areas around analytics and ERP services. So the total combined strength of our company is over 150 employees. And last year in 2017, we did a revenue of $26 million.
And now I want to ask you a question that's interesting for every potential CPQ customer. That is, how can a customer differentiate between a good implementation partner and an average implementation partner?
So if you look at the life cycle of the customer, every partner or implementation partner can bring different value. What we see ourselves as someone who has a good understanding of the business process. We also have good understanding of the healthcare and the high-tech vertical because some of our success stories have come from there, as well as the understanding of the platform. So if someone is doing a selection of a implementation partner, I would look at these three things. What is the depth of technology platform knowledge you have? Let's say you have chosen Apttus, Steelbrick, Calidus. So for example, we don't have Calidus experience, so we definitely are not the right partner for a customer like that. The second is, what is the industry knowledge? So we have very good experience with high-tech and med-tech and medical device companies, but we are probably not the best fit for financial services. So I would also look at companies that are industry focused and what success stories they have. And third is definitely I would look at the understanding and the best practices, especially now with newer elements of not just creating new codes, but renewal codes and service codes. Does that align with the best practices that company has done in the past? So I would kind of look at three attributes when I'm looking, or I would recommend customers when they are looking at choosing an SI.
And I think that makes perfect sense and was very detailed, so very helpful. Thank you. Now, what should customers typically do to make a project successful? So when you come in, the solution has already been selected because you're working with your current partners, Salesforce, Apttus, potentially others going forward. What can a customer do now to set the stage for a successful transformation project?
Yeah, Frank. So the key thing, as you said, is transformation, right? And for companies that have been doing transformation projects like SAP and ERP, the thing is SaaS-based CPQ implementations are very different. And for companies that have never gone through a transformation, it can get a little overwhelming. So based on the company size and the maturity, I would definitely suggest them to do a internal stakeholder meeting of what are the roles and responsibilities of every group. How would they like to participate in that? I would also suggest bringing on the technology group. I think a lot of times when people do these evaluations and eventually choose a tool, the IT is brought late in the game. But when you're doing implementation, they need to be at the front of it. So doing some data readiness, making sure that the systems are available, integration interfaces are all well defined, the team is available for profiles, user access. So that's the key thing. We have a checklist that we share before every implementation and a questionnaire that we share with customers. So that is really critical. And obviously, if you have a compelling event, let's say you want to make sure you want to go live before your sales kickoff, define that early on. Make sure you have enough buffer time. And the last thing is people always underestimate the time it takes for UAT. UAT is essentially when the rubber meets the road. And before you open up the system, you really need to perform a very thorough end-to-end, not only testing, but that's the time you want to sell your tool to end users. So never compromise on that timeline, never do UAT quickly, and it's better to get buy-in and share those feedback during that stage than to wait and go live with that. So these are some of the, I would say, planning and preparation that I recommend customers to do when they are starting to think of a CPQ project.
That's a great point. And for every listener who's not familiar with the terminology, UAT stands for user acceptance testing. Are there any additional challenges that customers typically encounter with implementation projects in addition to the testing piece?
So as I was saying, data readiness and making sure your data integration interfaces are well defined is really important. CPQ essentially is manipulating and working with your master data, which is your item master, product master, pricing master. Mature companies will have a master data strategy and they will have different systems. Smaller companies might not have that level of maturity, but I think data readiness, data cleanliness, making sure if you are defining your product structures, you have it well planned is going to be really key. So we try to do a data readiness and a data cleaning workshop, or we at least tell the customers to plan for that before they bring us on. So that's another pitfall I've seen customers they can avoid if they plan ahead of time.
Excellent advice. Now, let's go back to Standav also and tell us a little bit about the growth since you founded the company. Where's the company? Where have you been? Where are you going?
So what has been really interesting for Standav is we have been focused a lot on existing install-based customers. So I would say 70% of our revenue comes from existing customers who have some form of contract management, CLM, CPQ solutions, and 30% comes from net new implementations, which is very different from our competitors. So what we really specialize in is we focus on doing a lot of these health and process assessments. So if you are an existing customer that is not happy with your CPQ solution, we are the right partner to come in and come up with some of the challenges that you can address. And then we take those up and come up with a solution of doing that along with a roadmap. So that has been a very interesting, successful engagement for us. And using that, we kind of either recommend additional changes, removing customizations and adding newer features, or essentially sometimes even looking at a separate vendor that might meet the requirements. Because the company that bought a CPQ solution when it was $50 million and now is trying to use the same solution when it is 500 million, or the company that didn't have a partner model but is now getting most of their revenue from partners, or the company that does service CPQ or renewals but only is using their CPQ system for net new quotes, has to holistically look at their business model. So that has been a really interesting success for us, focusing on existing customers that have CPQ and either optimizing their existing solution as well as improving on top of them. And the last thing is, we have out of the 30 top med device companies, 4 of them are existing customers. So combined, they influence over 35 billion in revenue. So medtech has been a very interesting vertical for us. We've been really closely working with the medtech companies, and we have found out a lot of value that we can add to med device companies that are looking to either extend the CPQ or add more elements to their CPQ with product launches or service optimizations.
Excellent. And then when you work with these customers, like in the medtech industry, do you have some special offerings that you only have for these industries?
Yes. So for medtech and high tech customers, and high tech, I would say, has been a little less successful because people probably are looking at very different business models. But with medtech, what we have done is we have also built a process assessment framework where we look at elements of contract pricing, rebates, promotions, usage-based pricing, and hierarchical pricing that are very common for companies that are selling complex, expensive equipments, and then looking at service contracts, maintenance, warranties. So I would say if you engage us and if Standav is doing a assessment in a medtech company, you'll be able to leverage some of those findings that we have seen from other companies. And that is really unique to medtech that we offer.
And one thing I would like to know is also, how do you train your own team? You mentioned you have around 100 people right now. And how do you keep these folks up to date with the latest CPQ knowledge?
Yeah, so internally, Standup has a very flat structure. So we essentially have 3 roles in the company. We call it a consultant, who is essentially a subject matter expert, understands the functional pieces of it, is also sometimes a project manager. So for those people, we try to encourage them to understand the business process, understand the routes to market, and really understand the industry related things. The other profile we have in our company is a solution architect. For a solution architect, they need to be certified on the platforms they're working on. So we have over 40 people now certified on Apttus CPQ. Some of them are also certified on Salesforce CPQ, where they need to go through the rigorous evaluation training that these product companies offer, go through that. And the third profile we have is more of a technical architect slash developer. These have to have the Salesforce knowledge. So if you look at our offerings, all of them are on the Salesforce platform. So they need to maintain their certification. They need to understand the Salesforce technology, and that's how they are able to retain their knowledge. And we encourage them to go through the technical architect certification of Salesforce, as well as understand the nuances of the platform they are working on. So a lot of times they would be the ones who will be writing these customizations and all. So we try to keep our consultants based on their job profile and based on what they are doing, consultant, technical architect, solution architect, updated on their roles. And I personally take a very personal interest in their career movement. So every week on Wednesday, I have a one-on-one with one of our employees where I try to suggest what will look like in their career. So if somebody is a technical architect but wants to become a consultant, we create a path for them. And the same thing, if somebody is a solution architect now wants to be a little more hands-on and be a technical architect, we try to show them the path. So that's how we try to keep our employees engaged, as well as make sure that they are updated on the latest technologies they are working on.
And I guess that's very beneficial because I understand that there's a very high demand of CPQ knowledge in the market right now. And what I hear more and more often is that people look into the culture of the company, right? And that the culture becomes a differentiating factor. Is that what you see too?
Yeah, I mean, I would say when I started the company in my first year, I was spending a lot of time in getting business, selling, working on projects. But since last year, I have decided to focus 25% of my time completely on our employees, building the culture, making sure that holistically everybody has the tools they need to be successful, making sure I understand their internal aspirations and motivations and showing them the path. And sometimes people are very ambitious and they might want to start their own consulting company. So I always advise them that my biggest success is when my employees become my competitors, because that will tell me that I've given them the confidence to do that. And I always tell folks, you spend a few years for us, and if you ever want to start your own consulting company or if you want to do something of your own, I'm happy to advise and give you my lessons learned, because that's how even I got started. When I wanted to do this, I got a lot of encouragement from Apttus. The Apttus leadership and the founders were aware of what I was doing, and I got a lot of initial help from them. So I always see the culture of essentially helping employees, and eventually if employees become partners or competitors, I think it helps the ecosystem overall.
And I think that's very encouraging probably for every employee if you have a relationship like this. Now, let me ask one thing concerning the CPQ skills, or the CPQ capabilities, I should say. What do you see as the next game changer? So, especially on the platforms that you're working with right now, in Apttus and Salesforce, from a customer point of view, what of these more advanced functionalities are customers really asking for?
So one of the very interesting things I would want to talk about is definitely the elements of ability to quote assets and entitlements, what they call service CPQ. I know there's a little bit of hype around AI and blockchain and all those things, but if I look at just the set of my customers and then the innovation that is coming from the SaaS-based CPQ product companies, I think service CPQ is going to be the next big thing. And what I mean by service CPQ is the ability to create your quotes based on your maintenance and assets, and making sure when you are doing that, you verify entitlements. I think today it is done on the realm of renewals and assets, but I think it has to take its own set of offerings. And with Salesforce having their own Service Cloud offering, and I believe Apttus, as part of their Winter 17, also has their Service CPQ offerings. I think that will be the next big thing impacting CPQ customers that I foresee.
Now, I want to ask you, how did you get your CPQ knowledge? Were there any books, any speakers, any resources that you can recommend for listeners who are interested to learn more about this topic?
Definitely. So what I see is, for me, I was part of professional services, and my role was initially as a project manager, next as engagement manager, where I was also responsible for the revenue from the customer. So unlike a solution architect that is able to handle one customer, I was able to look at different customers. So I think the main thing to learn CPQ is you need to have a passion for understanding business in general. You should understand the value of the efficiency of selling quickly with the right discount and with the right set of product configuration. And it also gives you the whole understanding of the different business models. So I think developing that enthusiasm is really key. If you look at books and references, Apttus has the Code to Cash certification. I think that's available for free to everyone. So that could be a good one. I know there are a couple of interesting books also available. I think one of the CEO of Apttus wrote that a book on CPQ. I think that's a good, interesting one. And also, I've been following your work, Frank, and the material you put on the website. I think that's really interesting. So I think if I were to put it, 20% of the information should be from outside and 80% should be on your day-to-day activities. So if you are a project manager wanting to learn CPQ, try to understand the business process piece of it. If you are a technical architect trying to learn CPQ, try to understand the different configurations of why this is impacting business, and then you pair it up with the external knowledge that you had. But because of my exposure to over 13 clients and 9 implementations when I was in Apttus, I had a pretty well-rounded understanding of CPQ, and I would at least appreciate what different companies were doing when I have conversations with my existing clients.
Now, one question that is probably a couple of listeners will ask themselves is, where can I see Standav the next? Are you attending any events where customers can see you face-to-face?
So what we do is we have planned to participate on the Salesforce World Tour. So that is something we are planning to do this year. We are planning to participate in the Apttus Accelerate event in May. And if you're local in the Bay Area, we have a free meetup that we do every 2 months, and we are planning our next meetup in March. From there, I'm happy to share more insights and share more details. But I don't have any specific dates with me right now, but I would say Apttus Accelerate, Dreamforce, and the Silicon Valley meetups are the key ways to meet us.
Excellent. And we will put these notes in the show notes so that listeners see when these events are that you mentioned. Last question is, if somebody has any specific questions for you, is there any way to get the hold of you via email, Twitter, LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I am pretty active on LinkedIn. And if you add me on LinkedIn, my email is actually there on my profile itself. So I'm happy to connect, give my insights, and happy to learn from others as well on their journey with Code to Cash and CPQ. And if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I would say email is the best way to do that. I'm pretty quick in responding to my emails.
Protik, thank you very much. As always, interesting talking to you.
Thanks, Frank, for having me, and really happy that you're doing this for the community. I think it's really valuable, and I've been listening to your podcast and really appreciate for giving us an opportunity. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening and hope you learned something interesting today. If you like the podcast, please go ahead and rate it on iTunes or share it with your friends and colleagues. In the meantime, you can find us online at www.novuscpq.com. So long, everyone.